questions and answer them like I always do.
Hi everybody, welcome back. I missed you last week. Sorry, I didn't really make an announcement that I wasn't doing an episode last week because I was gone to West Virginia and I had a lot of fun. And I'll tell you a little bit about that trip because it was super cool. And then we'll get into your questions. If this is your first time ever hanging out with me on Tuesdays at 1 p.m., you should mark your calendar or get the calendar. Subscribe to my calendar. Go to homestudiocorner.com/calendar on your cell phone device, and then you can subscribe, and then I'll show up on your phone. It'll be super annoying because it'll pop up with a reminder, and it'll tell you that it's time to come to Ask Joe, and then you come hang out with us and be with the cool kids. Anyway, the last week I was in the great state of West Virginia, up in the mountains, out of cell phone range from the entire world. But I was there as a part of Ronan Chris Murphy's mountain recording retreat. So Ronan's been doing this. This is the third year in a row where they've done this retreat at this just retreat like center resort place in the middle of nowhere out in the mountains where you have like dinners together, family style at a big table. There's a golf course. And then we were doing a bunch of different classes and workshops and cool stuff like that around everything having to do with audio. So I was there presenting as one of the mentors of the week, and I had 3 2-hour sessions, and I went into it with this plan of like, we're going to write a song in the first session and record it in the second one and mix it in the third, and that sounded like fun to me. Then I realized that wouldn't work very well, and when I got there, I realized one of the things that we were doing a lot of was a lot of listening sessions where we would sit, usually at night. We'd go into the room, and they had actually a nice set of Neumann studio monitors in this room we were using. And we would plug in people's music and listen, and we would all give feedback. And one thing I noticed, and I've noticed a lot just in general doing what I do with Home Studio Corner, is a lot of times if I'm giving a mix critique to somebody, usually there's some things I'm going to say about the mix, obviously, but a lot of times the stuff that I'm talking about for the majority of the critique is production stuff. So if it's something that you've recorded and produced yourself, there are so many things that you need to get right in the recording and production phase that will make the mixing thing way easier and it'll make the mixes better. There's so many songs I listen to where from the beginning of the song through to the end is just exactly the same. The song starts, it's 2 guitars, bass, drums, vocals, and nothing changes for 4.5 minutes. That makes it feel like about a 13-minute song. Now, if it's amazing players and there's something that just keeps you engaged that whole time, great. But for me, and what I've experienced over the years, both being on both sides of producing a lot of music, I've released 50 songs in the last decade, to being the engineer for other people's music and producing them, and then a lot of the mixing that I've done, there is stuff you can do in the production side of things to make the songs infinitely more interesting, way more listenable, and also it makes the mixes better. See, we spend so much time, you probably spend so much time looking up the new mixing plugins, new mixing tutorials, new mixing tricks and hacks, when your real problem with your mixes is they're just boring. And you've got to learn to record more interesting parts so that by the time, the goal for me when I'm done with the recording phase of a song is for it to sound like a hit, to already sound amazing and mixed. That way, then when I go to mix, I've got less work to do. Does that sound daunting? Does it sound maybe impossible? Yeah. I never get there, but that's my goal, is to have this sound like a hit record before I ever go to mix it. And one concept that I shared last week that I'll share with you right now, so I got to do it really quick, is to imagine your productions like a triangle. A triangle that looks like this. So like a right triangle that's tipped over on its side. Can you see that? And so your song starts over here, and there's not much happening. Or maybe there's a lot for the intro, then it drops back. And then as you go through, if you watch the session, a lot of my sessions, you'll see it gets bigger as you go to the right. So it starts small, and then by the last chorus, there's a bunch more stuff happening. Now, you can't just add stuff for the sake of adding stuff, but in general, I find that little triangle mode of production keeps me from keeping everything exactly the same. I'm always adding things in. Verse 1 and verse 2 are different, and then chorus 1 and chorus 2 are different. The bridge is even more different, has more stuff, and then the final chorus is huge and has kind of everybody is in for an all skate. Now, you can't do that on every type of song, but I've done it on big, huge productions. I've done it on tiny acoustic productions, and it really does help make the song more interesting, and it makes it a heck of a lot more fun to mix as well. So, that's my tip for you today. Boom. The only thing that it would have made that boom more fun would be if I had something to drink right after it, like a defiant swig of coffee, slam it down. So I'm here for you. I'm here to answer your questions. So tell me what's on your mind. What are you struggling with? Where are you banging your head against a wall, so to speak? And maybe I can jump in and give you some advice or some tips to help. I've got a few questions in here already. If you already asked your question, feel free to ask it again, because I'm not going to scroll back up through all of your shenanigans as you're making fun of my John Mayer skills at the beginning of the podcast. Lazarus Mind says, how long have you been playing guitar? 20 years? 22 years? Wow. It makes me sad that I've been old enough to do anything that long. That's crazy. But yeah, it's been a really long time. Taught myself out of the first song I learned was I Can Love You Like That by John Michael Montgomery. My dad had the sheet music, and it had the lead sheet with the little chord diagrams above each chord. So it said C, and then above it had the little chart. And so I would mash my fingers down where it said to put my fingers. And I was horrible. It was amazing. How was the recording retreat? It was super great, Gary. Tim is awesome. I haven't seen him in years. You should come sometime, or we should do our own thing. Let's see. Somebody's here from Myanmar. Is it Myanmar or Myanmar? Myanmar. But it's 12:30 a.m. there. Ong Sithu, I appreciate you staying up late and hanging out with us. That means awesome. Fun with Kuldeep says, tell us something about mastering. You don't have to go super loud. One of the interesting things, and I don't follow a lot of this, if you really want to know mastering, follow Ian Shepherd and listen to the Mastering Show podcast and take his home mastering masterclass as well. But what's interesting kind of following what Ian's talking about lately is a lot of the services like YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, they're all kind of taking this whole loudness war thing into their own hands. So if you submit your stuff and it's way too loud, above a certain level, they're going to turn it down anyway. And we've all seen the examples where you take the same mix and you master it louder and louder and louder. If you level match it afterwards, most people will pick the more dynamic master that will say it sounds better and punchier once you level match everything. Of course, we're going to think that anything louder sounds better, but when you realize that there's already some level matching and Spotify is going to turn your song down anyway, gives you the freedom to just let it be. Like, don't just crush it to death with mastering. On the flip side, I like the way a hot master sounds as well. Like, I like the energy that comes from hitting a limiter some, right? So, and I've mastered stuff that I feel like is too quiet and stuff that I don't think I've ever gone too loud. So my stuff tends to come out on the quieter end of things, which I think is good because there's this thing called a volume knob that you can always turn up. Another thing about mastering, I love the movie The Greatest Showman and the soundtrack. It's phenomenal. I don't know if it's because it was for a movie, but there's a big dynamic range there to the point where the final song on the album, when we're in the car, I have to turn the volume as high as it will go, and I can still sort of hear that first verse where it's just him and a piano. It's really beautiful. And then when the guitars and everything come in, I have to turn it way down. To me, that's could stand a little more overall level. I would give up some dynamic range to be able to hear the song without having to adjust my volume knob throughout the album. But it's a soundtrack, so I feel like they get a pass. Street Kicker says, how do you do high quality sounds? Mine always sound like 2-bit. Shh. We're going to bleep that out so I can still say this is a non-profanity podcast. How do you do high quality sounds? So that's a big question, and having not like sat down with you, if you're talking about like virtual sounds, then it really does come down to what samples you're using, what virtual instruments you're using and all that. I don't live in that world, so I can't really speak to that. If you're talking about real sounds like voice in front of a microphone or guitar in front of a microphone or amp in front of a microphone, if you notice the trend, I'm a big fan of putting microphones in front of things. And that in that scenario, my mantra is get it right at the source. What is the source? Well, the source is the instrument itself. Let's talk about my voice. First, the song has to be good. That before I even sing the song, it needs to be a good song with a good melody. Then the performance needs to be good. So I've got to be a decent singer. If I sound like doo-doo in the room when you listen to me sing, no amount of magic with a microphone and fancy plugins is going to fix that. So that has to be in place. Then when you're putting a microphone up, it's got to be a good microphone for the voice. It's got to be in the right place, right placement, decent preamp, nice treatment after the fact. But it all starts upstream at the source itself. Right now, like people say, Joe, your voice on your podcast sounds so smooth. How do you do that? And I'm kind of like, ask the Lord, because this is just the way my voice sounds. It happens to be, I have a good speaking voice. My dad has this big, booming bass voice, and I inherited a little bit of that. And then I've been doing videos and podcasts for almost a decade. So that'll kind of work these muscles to the point where I'm able to do this with a good sounding voice. But a big part of it is this is just how my voice sounds. I have a little bit of an extra polish to my voice when I do these videos. When I'm hanging out with friends, I probably talk a little faster and don't quite, I don't know. But anyway, so a lot of that comes into play. I know that probably sounds arrogant, but that's a part of it. There's so many people. There was a guy I was on the phone with last week or 2 weeks ago or recently, and he was saying, you should do a course. So I have lots of courses I've created. I've got 20 courses I've created over the last 9 years. He said, you should do a course where you take really bad recordings and you fix them. And I said, I understand the problem, and there are things you can do to enhance something that's been poorly recorded. If you just can't go back and re-record, or the person died and this is what you've got, there are situations where that makes sense. My first option is to go back and re-record it and record it well. And there are things you can do. But I told him, I don't know if I could do a course like that, because at the end of the day, I would say, all right, listen to how I transform this thing, and it's going to sound better, but not great, because the recording did not sound great. So I'm not a miracle worker. I can't just do anything and make it amazing, right? At least the way I choose to work, which is, I think, the way most people want to work. They want to take what they've recorded and make it sound good. But the thing that you've recorded has to sound good to begin with, right? Okay. That was a long answer to a fairly straightforward, actually it was a pretty vague question, but we're good. Okay, Kip Buckner, what's up, Kip? Says, how much do you feel is an appropriate amount to spend per song if you're hiring musicians and such? Typical Nashville session, the rates are $75 an hour. So if I'm booking 3 musicians for the day, that's 2 3-hour sessions. If it's 4 musicians, if I'm booking 4 musicians for the day, hang on, let's do the math. It's $450 per person times 4. So when I do those tracking sessions you've seen me do at Steve Peffer's place, I'm paying $1,800 just for musicians for the day, and then I'm paying for the studio. So as you can imagine, the margins are tight if I'm selling these songs. But that's the Nashville rate, $75 an hour for non-major label master sessions, where it's like a demo kind of session. That's pretty typical. But I know people who'll do a song, they'll say, I'll record your song for $25. I've had people come in and they'll record for free. You just barter something. It's really, there's no standard, but maybe that gives you a place to work from. Now, remember, these are the kind of guys who we could lay down 7 or 10 songs, more close to 7, in that period. So whereas maybe a less experienced musician isn't going to be able to knock out as many songs, so you probably don't have to pay them as much, right? Part of what you're paying for with Nashville guys is they're so good that they can do things quickly. So you're paying for their experience. Sorry, I just talked about how great my voice sounds, and I'm coughing all the time. How do you deal with bleed on a mic from a guitar? When I want to mix the voice, the guitar is kind of in the middle. Well, if you've recorded the voice and the guitar at the same time, you've got to pan the guitar in the middle. That's your only option. If the voice is going to be in the middle, which it should be, you can't put the guitar off to the side. So you have to give that up. You can have an amazing sounding mix in mono. I was doing a song for somebody, and he wanted it to sound a little bit like Jack Johnson. I haven't listened to a lot of Jack Johnson, so I pulled up a few songs, and I noticed even on the full band stuff where it's acoustic, electric, keys, bass, and drums, it was almost a mono mix. Everything was up the middle, and it worked. It sounded good. So while I'm a big fan of stereo and panning things around, mono can be great. Or have your guitar vocal up the middle and add some other interesting things on the sides to enhance the production. Another guitar part, a piano part, an accordion, a flute, a glockenspiel, you name it. I'm really sorry. I keep coughing all over you. This is my first time on your podcast. It was cool to catch the intro. Just getting back home in the groove. Well, great. Glad you're here. I thought there was a question in there. What do you think of the Studio Live plugins? I haven't tried them yet. I know they're out, and I think it's cool that they're out. I just haven't tried them. Bruce, what's up, Bruce? Says, I'm about to record a full session with drums in a new room. What should I listen for right out of the gate in terms of getting it right at the source? You should make sure if you're in the room with the drums that you record things down and then stop and listen to everything. So record it, then stop everything, tell them to stop playing, then sit down at your speakers, mute the mics, sit down at the speakers and listen through. Listen to the whole kit, listen to each individual thing, and make sure it works. In a big studio where the drums are in another room and it's isolated, you can do a lot of that. You can say, just hit the tom, and they hit it, and you're listening through the monitors, and you can tell if that placement is right. When you're in the same room as them, you can't really do that. You can set levels, you can get a general idea on headphones, but the best way, the only way, is to have them lay down something, and then you go back and listen. It takes an extra step, but it's worth it to not, if you don't have a booth, right? It's the only option. So have them play it down. It may take a little bit longer. Listen. And then if anything needs to be changed, make those changes, then do it again. Play it down, give me a chorus, a verse and a chorus, or just give me 10 seconds of drums, then go back and listen, then make adjustments. It's a little bit annoying, but it's really the only way to make it work. Sorry, I keep coughing. If your acoustic guitar, I lost it. This thing scrolls sometimes. Okay, this is from Donald. It says, if your acoustic guitar part is going to be barely noticeable in the mix, would you still record it like normal or just record it direct? Never record acoustic guitar direct. Direct acoustic sounds like butt. Never sounds as good. These are beautiful instruments that are made from wood that people somehow figured out how to make it curve, and they sound amazing. So you get all this, like an acoustic, it's a beautiful instrument, right? There's all sorts of wood happening everywhere. When you plug it in, you're hearing the sound of that bridge, and that's it. You're literally hearing what a piece of metal or something, a little magnet next to some metal strings sounds like. Even if you've got a great pickup, even if you've got the little mic inside the guitar, even if you've got that pedal that Fishman makes that's supposed to make it sound like a mic'd up guitar, it doesn't. So to answer your question, I would always record acoustic guitar with a microphone. Never. Now, there are situations where I've heard blending the finger style with the pickup can work. You're going to have phase problems if you do that. And again, it just doesn't sound good. I don't know why we would use it if it doesn't sound good. That's what I think. Mark says, that wasn't a question, so I'm going to keep going. How do I know when my vocal level is in the right spot? It's a great question. There's no real good way to know. Sometimes you just have to live with it, move on and come back, listen to it on a different system so you can hear it better. Turning the speakers down really low is helpful. That's more helpful to know if the vocal's getting too low because you lose it. If it's too loud, it's just hard to know. It depends on the song and the style of music and the way you like to mix. You and I could mix the same song and my vocal could be louder than yours, but they could both work for the song. So it's just an experience thing. And listen to other mixes of other people in the same genre and see where their vocal sits and then try to kind of emulate that as best you can. Norman says, Joe, I've got 9 mono mixes in my Studio Live 32 Series 3. I need to copy one monitor mix to the others. Can we do it on the board? No clue. Check the manual. Would you recommend using, this is from Eric, would you recommend using figure 8 pattern when recording the room with not optimal acoustics? The idea is that it would pick up less of the reflections. I get the point, but it's not going to pick up less of the reflections because the back of the mic is picking up everything behind it. So let's say we're in this room, which isn't necessarily treated super well. If I've got this microphone on my voice right now, chances are you're not hearing a ton of my room right now for a couple of reasons. One, I'm close to the mic. I mean, I'm not that far up, 3-4 inches away. And 2, this is a directional microphone. It's only picking up in this direction. The direction of my head is not picking up behind, and it is picking up some from the sides, but my voice is so close. If this was a figure 8 microphone, it would be picking up directly opposite of me as much as it's picking up my voice, which means arguably it would pick up more room sound. So no, I think figure 8s are great if it's a ribbon mic and you like the way the ribbon sounds, or if you're trying to capture more room sound, and if you want to use the null point. So if this is a figure 8 microphone pointing at me, it's not picking up sound from the sides here, but it is picking up sound from that way. So if you're trying to, some guys will use it, and I'm not going to use examples, just that. Those would be the reasons. But no, if you're trying to eliminate room sound, directional mics are probably your best bet. You know directional mics are always your best bet. Because you're losing all your highs and lows. That totally sounds like a mixing tip. You're losing all your highs and lows. Okay, Harvey says, what's your opinion on miking all your cymbals? Splash, ride, China. Pros and cons? Obviously, you can get a great song without doing so. But would it be beneficial? So everything I've done on drums, it's overheads. Maybe a hi-hat mic, which I probably end up muting in the mix. But you can get the job done with overheads. For certain styles of music like metal, where it's big and heavy, and they do a lot of work on the hats and the ride, you may want to put a ride mic and a hat mic. But no, not every single cymbal. The phase issues that happen when you do that are not worth it. Plus, it's just a lot of mics to set up. So no, I would not mic every cymbal. There's no benefit there. And that's all assuming the drummer knows how to play in a way that's balanced and works well. Even if he can't, I still don't think I'd put up a bunch of mics. Celising says, I just grabbed a pair of Philips HiFi speakers. What's your take on it? They're passive, wants to hook it up to a power amp. I don't know. I never heard of them. But as you'll notice, I've been using these for like a dozen years, and I'm just using them because they still work, and I can get good mixes on them. So if you can get good mixes on them, I say go for it. Robert Simpson, will you ever do an EP using only virtual instruments for instrumentation? It's possible, but I just like instruments in front of microphones. That's what I enjoy. That's what makes me excited, so probably not. Listen to... never mind. Ryan Greer. Man, y'all are bringing the questions. And they keep scrolling down, and I keep losing what I was going to say. Ryan says, I recently recorded drums and used a room mic in a big church sanctuary. The room mic is delayed quite a bit, so I moved it to be in time with the drums. Is that weird or wrong? It's not weird, and it may work. Like if you need the drums to be tight, but you still want a room sound, you can move that room mic up. I've done that before. Part of what makes a room mic awesome to me is the fact that there is a time delay. So I can't think of the last time I moved it up. I leave it. Now, you want to EQ it, and maybe compress the crap out of it. Might sound good if it's a rock song. But no, moving that one microphone is not going to be a make or break it thing. But I just wouldn't spend much time on it. If it's not working the way it is and you did a few things like EQ or compression, then maybe try moving it. But I wouldn't move it just because there is a delay. Sometimes that delay is what makes a room mic sound so great, right? Because you're hearing it later in time. Do you ever come to Ohio or Michigan to play shows? No. But I'd be open to it. Give me an invitation. When I try to export my beat, it says clipping has occurred. What should I do? Turn it down. Turn down your tracks. You're clipping too much. You can also put a limiter on the main bus. But I would turn your tracks down first because they're clipping somewhere in the middle. It's just all too loud. Turn that sucker down. And go watch my video on how to make your mixes louder. That'll explain the other part of how to get it loud without having things up to where they're clipping. Need to add a choir vocal at the end of a song. There's only me, and I know the trick about doubling, then do it again, but with a bit of time shift, but I need more than 3 voices. I need 4 to 5. Any tips? I've done all sorts of things like that. Just record yourself over and over. If you have the vocal range to do it, if it needs to be 3 parts or just a bunch of people, stand in different places in the room, face away from the microphone, sing different parts, sing with different voices, like you're making up voices, it can totally work. Easier thing is to get another person to sing with you or 2 more people and then double those. If you do it yourself, the problem is it's still going to have that same character of your voice, so it's never going to sound exactly like another choir. But what you're doing can work. You just need to record more tracks. Just double it more and more and more. What do you prefer, acoustic sound or digital sound? Well, I don't know what you mean. Do you mean like tape versus like recording into because it's all everything's analog. Digital sound can't touch my ears. My acoustic guitar is an analog device. This microphone is analog. The preamps are analog. Then it becomes digital and I mix it there, but then it has to come back out my speakers, which are also analog. So I like both. Digital means nothing without analog, but I don't record to tape. And I don't think it's necessary. Everything out there, not everything. I would bet you everything on the top 40 right now was not recorded to tape. Or at least a big majority of it was all done digitally. And guess what? It sounds great. So move on. Move on, make some music. How do you deal with calluses that build up to the point of peeling at the edges? Ooh. And they catch on the strings. My wife has this thing, it looks like a cheese grater. And I use it I get calluses on my hands right here from doing pull-ups. And when they get too big, they can rip. I know it's gross. They can rip on the bar, and then you have a bloody stump of a hand, and then you have to wait a while before you can do it again. So I'll use that to file them down. You can also use like a pumice stone that doesn't work very well, but that little file thing can work. Your fingertips are more sensitive, so it may just be like a normal fingernail file that's a little more gentle, or some soft sandpaper. Go see a. I'm not joking. Go like get a manicure and have them. A lot of guitar players will get their fingernails done, so they're stronger for like the fingerstyle stuff on the right hand. So that's something to think about. You probably won't do it though. I'll be honest, I wouldn't have done it either. Joel says, "Hi Joe, I'm dumb. I'd like to know if you have a simple way to learn the Nashville charting, the one Steve Peffer has written out for your songs." I don't have. There's a chart on my a video on my YouTube channel called "How to Chart Songs," and I basically walk through that. I believe in that video. It's been a while since I checked it, but I'll be doing a course fairly soon on that. So stay tuned. Can you give some ideas on dealing with the writer's block? Write. Just write more. Write every day. No matter what, just write anything that comes to mind. It can be stupid, it can be dumb. Sometimes you just have to do the action, and then the more inspired actions come later. Can you recommend any good headphones? Sennheiser, HD 280 Pros for recording, HD 650s for mixing and mastering if you want to spend a few bucks for some really nice sounding headphones. Rob Nordvik, what's up, brother? I recorded 2 distorted guitar performances using different guitars and amps, yet there still seems to be phase cancellation in mono. Any recommendations? You probably just had a too similar of a tone. The thing about recording with 2 guitars and 2 different amps, if you dialed in almost the exact same sound, that can happen. But it's anytime you have wide guitars and you go to mono, it's going to sound quieter in mono. So that's partially normal. But I would just make the tones different, or different parts, different voicings. Maybe don't play the exact same chord in the exact same place. Maybe play it up the neck, down the neck, things like that. Joe, do you have a songwriting routine to keep yourself in creative vibe constantly, even when you don't feel like it? I don't. I go through phases. When it's time for me to release an EP, I will write a bunch of songs. The thing is, though, I'm not doing that once every few years. I'm doing it at least once a year. Last year I did it 3 times in a year. This year I've done it once. So no, I don't write every day, every week. But I'm always playing music on some level, whether it's playing the piano upstairs while the girls are dancing around, or playing on projects and stuff like that. What would be your opinion on miking a jazz group with close mics and a set of stereo room mics? I feel like jazz is cool because you're not expected to get anything unnatural. It's like the drum kit. If it sounds like a couple mics in a room, great. Even like I was listening to the Ray LaMontagne record, the first one he put out, those drums sound like they just like kind of were starting to put up mics and said, I'm lazy, let's just record these 2. But it kind of works and kind of sounds cool. I feel like jazz is even more forgiving. Granted, I've not recorded jazz, I don't think. But I would just go minimalist. I'd go kick, snare, overheads, and I'd really focus on those overheads being spot on, getting a good, like if I get the whole sound from the overheads, great, and then maybe a little bit extra kick for a little extra body, and snare would be just a nice bonus. And I probably wouldn't put anything on because I wouldn't put anything on the toms, because you don't typically hear do-do-do-do on toms on a jazz track, right? Now, if you've got the mics, go ahead and put them up there, but my focus would be on overheads, almost exclusively. Aw, Homestead loves me. Thanks for that. Soundcast Studios, I'm in a relatively small band right now. So you're physically small people? Because that's awesome. So I wonder, what's the best approach to releasing music? Album, EP, single? That's a great question. I don't know what's best. I know for me, I haven't done a full-length album in a while, but I've done a lot of EPs. To me, an EP is an easier thing to wrap your head around. And an EP lets me test things out. So I could do, last year, for example, I did a full band EP at the beginning of the year with a different drummer and bass player than I normally use, and I kind of heavily produced a lot of it. Then I did an acoustic EP where I only let myself use acoustic guitar and some percussion and my voice. And that was very different, and it was really fun. Then I did a full band thing that we tracked in 2 days in a studio at a friend's studio. So I got to do 3 rounds of creating music without having to make it be this really long project including 13 songs. I'm all for an album. I think albums are great, but I also like the idea of a quick EP where I do 4 or 5 songs and I get to do the process. So if ideally you do some EPs, you do some singles, you do some albums, if you haven't released music in a long time, set a goal to release a single in the next 30 days. Do that, and then maybe bump it up to an EP, and then do a couple EPs, or maybe even an album. I'm out of time. I gotta go.